Hi everybody, welcome to Saturday Live at the Backyard Bird Center. Got a series of these out there about Mark's favorite types of feeders, and today we're talking about my favorite mealworm feeder. And this is very topical right now because the bluebirds are in the early start of their nesting cycle, and people are really asking a lot about the mealworms and how to feed them and things like that. Now I have a video out there, and I can put a link in for that about how and when to feed mealworms. But this is a very topical one right now because people ask about what's my favorite, and I thought I would share my thoughts on what I think makes a really good mealworm feeder. Now, notice I didn't call it my favorite bluebird feeder because mealworms aren't just for bluebirds. That's mainly what people's goal is when they're feeding and going to the trouble of feeding mealworms. But Carolina wrens and chickadees and even larger birds like robins and stuff like that will eat mealworms, and that's a part of what makes a good mealworm feeder. Is you can be general or very targeted, and we're going to talk about those two, and then I'm going to give you my favorite overall one that I've used over the years and I really like, and the reasons why. But first off, are you feeding live mealworms or dried mealworms? And we're going to start with dried mealworms first, because dried mealworms provide less of a challenge when it comes to feeding than lives do, because lives can actually crawl out of a feeder. So if you have a feeder that's made of a rough surface like wood and you're trying to put mealworms in it, they're just going to crawl right out of it and boom, fall into the grass, and maybe even before your birds get a chance to feed it. So, if you're feeding dried mealworms, they're not going anywhere. They are dead, but that in itself provides a challenge that the bluebirds may not recognize them, or the chickadees may not recognize them as food at first. You really have to bait them in to get them to eat those dried mealworms. And when you're feeding babies in the baby season, the adults are feeding their babies, live mealworms are definitely better for them, for the moisture content, and the nutrition value is even better. But all winter, my bluebirds have really been eating my dried mealworms this year. And for that, you don't need anything extravagant. You can use just a simple dish type feeder. This is just a hanging metal dish. It works for both live and dried because it's slick enough that the live ones can't crawl out of it. But it's really good for dried mealworms. Just a real simple design. No weather protection. If it rains, they get soaked in there. And people ask about that. If the dried mealworms get really soaked, initially, if it happens quickly and the birds find them, they'll eat them when they're wet like that. But after a couple of days, or even after a day, you might want to toss them out because they're going to get kind of mushy. If you're going to go, there is a process called rehydration of mealworms, but that is really hot water if you want to plump them back up again. But we're just talking about feeding straight dried mealworms, and there's lots of feeders that can do that. Now, a problem that I have in my yard is starlings. If my bluebirds don't find the mealworms pretty quickly, the starlings move in and wipe them out, and that is very frustrating. And of course, it can get expensive depending on how many mealworms you're putting out at a time. And there are feeders that you can put a lot of mealworms out, and so you don't have to refill them as often. But again, unless they're inside of a cage, this is a little mealworm feeder that is inside a cage, and that keeps the starlings from getting in there. But the smaller birds can get in there and feed on the mealworms. That's one answer to that, and it's a very effective answer. Another one that's been around for many years are mealworm feeders that have holes that are 1.5 inches in diameter, just like the bluebird box, and this one has several holes so that the smaller birds can get in and get to the mealworms in there, but the starlings cannot. And just like a regular hopper feeder, the lids raise on them, and this is a really great. Now this one is very slick. It is rough on the bottom, so if they're live mealworms, they're going to be crawling around there, which is not a bad thing when you're really trying to attract the mealworms, because those moving insects are a magnet to birds like bluebirds. They see those mealworms moving, boy, they want to get in there, and it triggers that food response, and they want to get to it. Whereas the dried mealworms, not so much. Now, I've talked about, if you've watched any of my other videos about feeding mealworms, you've heard me talk about the olive oil trick. And you can take, when you put your dried mealworms in a feeder like this, You can take a drop or two of olive oil and put them on those dried mealworms, and it makes them kind of glisten. And of course, the clouds and things and the sun shining on it, it actually can give the illusion that they are moving. And that's one way that people get birds to take to dried mealworms. But the live mealworms, which are usually what you have to do if you really want to get started and get your bluebirds to discover them. A lot of people do that in the spring, in the nesting season. And those, when you do need those very slick feeders like the glass or the Pyrex or like that painted metal, are very good to keep those from crawling out of there. But again, those are very attractive to a lot of birds. And live mealworms, which we have to keep in our refrigerator to keep them in a state of suspended animation, if you will. And most people are more selective about how many these guys they put out a day. I usually do 25, 30. And boy, the bluebirds get on the schedule. They know when you're putting them out, and they start attacking them right away. But you can use these to train bluebirds to eat the dried mealworms. So you start gradually putting dried ones in there with them, and you can get them moved over. So from simple feeders to putting them in cages to the ones with holes in them that we talked about, there's lots of different ones. But what's my favorite? Oops, sorry, I hit the microphone. I hope that wasn't too loud. Over the years, this has been my favorite style of bluebird feeder. There are a couple of different companies. This one is from the old Joel Yankee company, and you can see it, the high slick sides keeps the mealworms from being able to crawl out of there. And you can raise it this high, which are easy for the bluebirds to get into, but it's also easy for robins. And it's also easier for starlings to get in. But once you've got the bluebirds have discovered those and got them coming to it, you can actually lower the roof on this feeder, and so you can slide it down so that the opening gets smaller and smaller, so that the bluebirds learn once those mealworms are in there, then they're going to make an effort to get in there, and it's very hard for the larger birds to get into here. So this is my favorite bluebird feeder. It has been for many years, and we've sold lots and lots of them. It's not as effective as a cage at keeping starlings out, but it's very effective at it, because being able to raise and lower that roof. So Mark's favorite mealworm feeder. This one is actually, I think, called the Seed Saver from Joel Yankee. And one of the great things about that is, with the seed word, if you're not feeding mealworms in it, you can always put seed in it. You can always just be another bird feeder at your station. So part of the season can be a mealworm feeder, part of it just seed feeder. So there's Mark's favorite mealworm feeder. Thanks for the idea for the program. If you like the programs, please give us a like, give us a share. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Send an idea for future programs in to me if you would. Until then, come on, let's talk birds.